Jesus says he is the way, the truth, the life. We have to go back to what is true to have anything done the right way. And you have said that, unfortunately, many people who are influencing our society today, they have not been framing the narrative correctly. And they're saying things, they've misdiagnosed situations. For example, George Floyd, we look at that and they misdiagnosed what that was. And therefore, they continue to push things from an emotional, kind of a fear-mongering kind of way that brings about anger without giving the real context. And you said, as a pastor, what you see them doing is they're feeding the flesh and not the spirit. I want to talk a little bit about that. Could you maybe talk to us how important it is that we have a right narrative? Because we are seeing a false narrative playing out in the media right now, even as we look at events like COVID-19 deaths, or especially in the situation of the George Floyd murder. Could you just talk to us again about why it's important that we frame these correctly and the damage that is done with a false narrative?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a great question. So the first thing I like to point out is the media has become more pushing an agenda than basic journalists. So in journalism, you're supposed to report facts, report the news as it stands. So in America, when you look at it statistically, more white people get killed by police officers than black people. Now, it's disproportionate, but there's a larger number of white people that get killed by police officers. But yet in the media, and CNN and mainstream media, I don't think I've ever seen the images of a white person that got killed by police. So if the only thing I ever see is a black person that gets killed by police, then obviously my subconscious mind is telling me that that is the norm. And so it puts me in a state of fear. I've heard people say they're afraid for their sons and their brothers and all these other things. And so obviously the media is not trying to promote truth and true journalism, but they're promoting this idea of the overwhelming, prejudice or bias of the police officers. And that's what is deemed as racism, because it seems like all police are in on this, white police officers versus black males. And so we have to get to and start to look at things and say, and isolate them and say, if you find a police officer that is a bigot or prejudiced or biased, he shouldn't be a police officer, first of all. He has to be brought to justice, and police forces have to do a job of bringing these people, exposing them, so that we don't have this false sense of white cop. And I've heard people say this in mainstream, the cops are literally gunning down or hunting down black people. And so we have to be careful of this narrative that the media is promoting over and over again. Why did they have to show George Floyd, his image, over and over and over again? I saw one that they showed the whole 8 minutes of the interaction, when the police officer's on him. And, of course, the only thing that does is that incites anger and bitterness and fear in people. And so we have to be very careful and to sort through that and get to real truth in order for us to properly address some of the issues in society.